controversial in the room of people that we hear, but we do not advocate for or against decriminalisation. So you might think that we're taking the middle road. What we do advocate for is that it should be something that should be more addressed from the health sector than from the criminal justice process, because we recognise the harm that the criminal justice process and touching that causes for the people who are in there. And the people that are in there come from very vulnerable groups of people, and we're not serving or benefiting wider community. Those individuals and those whānau are more disproportionately impacted by touching the system. And for things like convictions for cannabis use and possession, is that something that is deterred, and the question around decriminalisation is whether it needs to be deterred in that way at all. Is that effective by engaging the criminal justice process? And is that something that we have been asking our politicians, whether or not we need to find better ways around that? And just when I was introduced in the beginning, referring to Just Speak, and I have to apologise. I don't know where the statistics were around the increase in young people being convicted for cannabis use or possession came from. In fact, in recent times, conviction rates for young people has dramatically decreased, and the introductions of diversion have shown that things like cannabis consumption, the police are taking a wider approach to it and using their discretion more to not engage people, in particular our young people, in the criminal justice system, because it has more adverse effects than what the apparent social harm caused by cannabis consumption is supposed to have. But back to this kaupapa, just speaking, if you want to affect change, political change, how that looks, it's not necessarily like a sexy topic, like same-sex marriage. That became sexy last year. The social movement was there to support it, and then it was very easy to get cross-party support for that. With Just Speak, practically speaking, we would advocate for change in getting any political change that you want. Getting something that has support, like decriminalisation of marijuana, is something that does actually have quite a broad support across society. That's something that happens by getting people on side, being realistic around MMP and how that works. If you can get a smaller party, that was suggested by my learned friend who spoke before me, he said targeting internet mana, that could be smart, because they could potentially be a coalition partner, because you're going to need to get change somewhere from the left, I imagine, and that's something that they can put on the table in cabinet if they get seats along that way. But from Just Speak, recognising that over 50% of our prisoners are more susceptible to drugs and alcohol addictions, that there's harm in that, but that being convicted for marijuana use and possession can create more harm than the apparent social harm itself. But you can affect change. I'll be really impressed if that's something that gets put on the table in the next government that comes into play, but I might leave that to my political colleagues and friends to my left. Thank you for your time. Just Speak, you can find us. We do write reports. Actually, we're launching a report on unlocking prison, which sort of definitely advocates for the reduction in how our criminal justice system is used, and we would advocate for the prosecution around cannabis use as being something that's more negative than positive. So I may not have answered all the questions here, but that's our proposal.
Kia ora, Julia, thank you for that. Okay, now we'll hear from some political representatives. We've got two current MPs, and we've also got a representative of the ALCP, Gillian Crawford, President of the party, and who are doubtless, despite what might have been suggested earlier, of perhaps enjoying some success in the next election. Although we have to say that if we think about the impact that politicians have had up till today on cannabis law reform, we're not really seeing very much at all. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing whether there are some solutions that people think they might have. Julian.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks a lot, Jeff. I just want to correct you there. I'm actually the leader of the Aotearoa Legalised Cannabis Party, and we have a president, an acting president as well. He couldn't be here today, but that's Dr. Richard Good. And I think that it's a really appropriate name for this conference, Colorado Calling, because this is a really great development of what we're seeing in the States, and the regulatory model that they seem to have in Colorado looks to be working, even though it's in its early stages. Not only is there taxation revenue coming in from cannabis, there's also additional excise tax. And it's this excise tax which is being used for targeted taxation. So that revenue is going basically straight into the education system to help with building new schools and things that are going to benefit the community. And I think that having the proper use of that revenue is what gets the community to support legalisation. They see it as having multiple benefits, even if they're not using cannabis themselves.